We are tracking reaction after Donald Trump's State of the Union last night. He laid out what he said are his administration's accomplishments from the past year.
The stock market has set 53 all-time record highs since the election. Think of that, 1 year. Boosting pensions, 401ks, and retirement accounts for the millions and millions of Americans. They're all gaining. Everybody's up, way up.
That's Trump touting his economic record in his address. The White House is looking to shore up support ahead of November's midterm elections and prevent Democrats from retaking control in Congress. Right now, Trump is facing some of his lowest approval ratings ever, sitting at just below 40%. Now, Trump did have one of the biggest audiences of the year last night. He gave the longest State of the Union speech ever, 1 hour and 47 minutes. But did his message resonate with his party and with Americans? For more on that, we've reached former U.S. Republican Senator Jeff Flake. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm wondering what some of your major takeaways were as you listened to that lengthy State of the Union yesterday.
Well, I think the Republican base will love it. He's speaking right to them. I think about 82% of Republicans are still firmly with him, and they'll like the speech. I would question whether he reached or moved any of the independents that he really needs to move at this point. And obviously, Democrats didn't like it at all.
When we are talking about how it resonated with Republicans, and we'll stay on that for a moment. Of course, you were a former Republican senator, certainly also critical of Trump. And you recently wrote about how you believe that people within the party are starting to move away from Trump. It didn't appear that way yesterday when we saw the support. Is there something that is shifting within the party?
Oh, there is, and I think it's been reflected in some of the votes lately. The vote to end tariffs on Canada, for example. You had 6 Republicans defect, and believe me, as you get closer to the midterms, and more importantly, when you get past the filing deadlines for the primary elections, then you'll see Republicans with a lot more courage. And believe me, there's not going to be a vote 150 days from now in the House of Representatives or the Senate to extend the president's tariffs that he's putting on now. That just won't happen because there's opposition to it. So, yeah, he can put on a good face about, how people stand on tariffs and they're working. Americans don't like them. They know they pay more.
So do you believe that that's something he will consider? I mean, historically, he hasn't been someone to necessarily react to what people want, more what he sees perhaps in the market or perhaps within the party. Do you believe that that tariff regime that he's made an economic pillar of his agenda will stick around then?
Well, we've seen him back off a number of times on tariffs when they start to bite and when, Treasury market goes sideways. So yeah, he is a pragmatist in the end on that, and I think he'll come, to the time 150 days from now, he'll be able to impose some tariffs under different authorities. But for the most part, this was a definitive decision. It's going to be very difficult for him to do anything that requires congressional approval. And believe me, Republicans in the House and the Senate will be saying, please back off. Because it's not a good message during the election.
We know that certainly there was some blame that was aimed at the Democrats when, Trump was talking about some of the hardships that the nation is facing right now. I'm wondering to that end if there was anything that surprised you in terms of either the reactions seen from within the audience listening into the State of the Union or reaction from outside.
Well, I would encourage Democrats to all attend. I mean, this isn't something you miss. And to not protest or do any outward manifestations. If you don't like what he's saying, you certainly don't have to stand, but don't be a spectacle because that just plays into his hands. But if anything surprised me, it's just how visceral he is. I sat through 18 State of the Union addresses and the first couple of President Trump. And it's just, for him to say this side is just crazy. They're just crazy. That's just kind of beneath the level of where the president should be. And so, yeah, it surprises me when it shouldn't, I guess, anymore, just at how crass and crude and vulgar it sometimes is.
You know, certainly when we talk about the political implications, and early on in our conversation, you talked about perhaps how the Republican base very much liked what he had to say, but it may not have swayed independents. Just how critical is that when we're talking about the political impact of the midterms?
Oh, it's completely, important. You look at my state of Arizona, we're about a third Republican, third Democrat, third independent, and you've got to move independents if you're going to win that state. He did last time, but all polls suggest that he has a hard time with them now. And I don't think there was anything he said last night that's going to move independents his direction. The fatal mistake that many politicians make is feeling that they can tell Americans how they feel. And that's what President Trump tried to do last night. That's what President Biden certainly tried to do during his term, and it doesn't work. Americans know how they feel. And so I think that's going to be difficult. The economic message is certainly most important for midterms.
Now, finally, I did want to ask you, now that you have been outside of the inner circle, so to speak, as a former senator, I'm wondering what sort of reflections you have on how the politics of the country has evolved over the past few years.
Well, it's very disturbing for me, and that's when I left, I said that was the biggest problem, that kind of the norms that are being shattered, that you can at a State of the Union address, stand up and say one side of the room is just crazy, you're crazy, and demean the Supreme Court and undermine confidence in elections and institutions. That's dangerous, and it's too bad. So it has evolved in a bad way. I don't think that it's that it can't be reversed. It can, but that's going to require really good leadership on both sides of the aisle, and I hope we get it.
Mr. Flake, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights on the State of the Union address.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
That was former U.S. Republican Senator Jeff Flake.